Okay, we'll get started. So like I said, good morning everyone. Welcome to this Advanced Steel webinar where we'll be looking at the additional data added to the core Advanced Steel system via the Graitec Advanced Steel Powerpack. I think most of you know me, but for those who don't, my name's Rob Merriman. I'm one of the application engineers within the structures team here at Graitec. I've been working in the steelwork and metal industry since I left university. Before I worked for Graitec, I was a draftsman working across two subcontract drawing offices. So as an application engineer here at Graitec, my primary focus is the training, support, customization of Advanced Steel. But over the last year or so, we have been looking and expanding into the actual AEC collection. So started to work with Revit and workflows between those programs and other programs. If you do have any questions either about today's webinar or anything else relating to Advanced Steel, my email address and my Twitter handle, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Just get in contact. We're here to help you. So just before we crack on with today's webinar, we'll just have a quick look at the previous webinars that we've been doing in January. If any of them are of interest to you or you missed them and you want to get a recording, our marketing team are just processing everything at the moment. So if you have missed anything, if you email marketing@graitec.com and ask them for the specific webinar, once it's uploaded, they'll be able to send it to you for you to have a look at. So just to run through, we had a webinar from John Bennett on the Advanced Steel and Plant 3D collaboration and how we can work between those two programs. Sarah and Tommy looked at Advanced Steel, Revit and Advanced Design and the workflow between those three programs. There was a very interesting webinar with Tommy on Advanced Steel with an MIS solution. So we looked at Graitec Advanced Workshop. And then Tommy did another one, which was looking at drawing customization for the plant industry, just some general drawing tips and tricks in there. And then finally this afternoon, I'm going to be doing a short webinar on the integration and the workflows between Revit and Advanced Steel. So like I said, the marketing team are, because those webinars were finished in the last week or so, the marketing team are still processing all the recordings and everything, so they're not quite there for me to hand out just yet. So if you do need anything, please contact marketing@graitec.com. So this morning, we're going to look at some of the local data that Graitec have added into Advanced Steel. This data is added into Advanced Steel through the Graitec Advanced Steel Powerpack, which is an add-in to Advanced Steel, which offers you extra functionality. So you can see on the top there, you get an extra ribbon. So we've got some extra functions in there, but it's also our deployment method for new data. So just to let you all know where we stand with data, we as Graitec, Advanced Steel is no longer a Graitec product. It is an Autodesk product. It got bought in late 2014. As we are a platinum partner, we are allowed to develop content for Advanced Steel, but we're not allowed to change any of the core data. So we can add to it, but we can't change what's already there. So today we're going to look at the new cold roll suppliers and some previous ones that we have that were added into the Powerpack a few years ago. We've actually updated some of that stuff as well. Then we're going to look at the joint data that goes along with those suppliers. And then we're going to look at some of the other bits and pieces that have been added through the Powerpack. So we've added some weld mesh in there and some perforate panels. So I'll do a little bit of modeling on that just to show you what you get on that. There's a couple of bolts and some anchors in there that have been added that you might not know about. So we'll run through that. And then finally, we'll look at other sections such as half round, square edge bar and things like that. So the main data that we add through the Powerpack is cold roll data. So this can either be updates to supplies that were added in the Powerpack a few years ago, or it can be, so for example, that would be Hadley's Ultra Beam 2 and Ultra Z and Ultra Ease Beam. They've asked us to add those into the system, or they're just new suppliers who want their data adding into Advanced Steel, such as Thomas Panels. We've added some steel sections, some Stedmans, the Kingspan, SBS system, and like I said, the Hadley Ultra Beam and Ultra Z. So what we're going to do today it's going to be fairly short webinar, we should be done before about 10:30, is I'm just going to do some basic modeling and just show you that kind of data that's been put in there, and just to show you a few bits and pieces. So let me come out of this. Okay, just to check, can you all see my advanced steel? There should be a shed model with some purple beams, just to make sure the software, the webinar software, is keeping up with me. Okay, so that's fine, we'll crack on. So what we're going to start with is we're going to have a look at some of the cold roll tools and that new data, like I said, which we've added through the Powerpack. So I'm just going to start with some roof purlins. So I'm going to start with just the purlin macro. And select the rafters. So today might just be a couple of tips and tricks for using the cold roll tools as well. Now for the purlins, I don't want to select a reference point, but when it pops up at the bottom here and says, do I want to select an additional reference beam? I'm going to choose yes. And I'm going to choose one of these columns. So that will set the ease beam out based around that column. So that we'll give the macro a second. That will put the purlin macros in for me. So if we look at the sections, okay, so I'm going to start with some of the I'm going to put some Ultra Z2s in. You can see then they update to the Ultra Z, so they're under Ultra Z2. I don't know, we'll make it 200. Okay, so we do have lots of options. Today I'm not going to go through every option within every macro. It's just going to give you a bit of an overview of how they work and some bits that people might miss from time to time and get frustrated with. So I'm pretty much going to leave all of these settings. For the ease beam, I'm just going to go and change that to an Ultra Ease Beam 2. We'll make that a 200. Now what you can do, if you're always using Hadleys, for example, the Ultra Zs and the Ultra Beams, once you've set it all up with the sections and the spacings that you want, if there are sections and spacings that you will use all the time, you can import those values into the library so that you can just click on them. So you can see that when we did the Thomas Panels ones, we actually did add a library entry for Thomas Panels side rails and Thomas Panels Z purlins. So that is the macro for the roof purlins to start with. We'll put a couple of connections on just to show you the joint data that we've put in there. So if I go to the purlins cold rolled, I'm just going to start with a single purlin plate to go on the end here. So we're going to select the main beam, select the roof purlin, and that will then put a welded plate on, but it will put it in with all the Hadley's Ultra Z2 settings in there, the correct bolt spacings, the correct heights, all of that, and the same for the plate. Now, what we have found is what a lot of people don't realize is that although the joint that we put on was a single purlin plate, what we can do from this macro is we can control a lot more things. So currently the type is single purlin plate. But you see here we have a drop down. We can actually make that out of a T. We can make it out of a folded plate. Okay, so you can see that the hole sizes for the connection to the Z are correct. Yeah, we might have to go and change the bolts because they look a little bit heavy in there. And if your supplier does have a custom cleat connection, then you can choose the custom cleat from it. So I'm just going to leave it on single purlin plate. Now these joints, again, if you need the sleeves and the stays, you can see that I'm on the Hadleys. It's already picking up that it's an Ultra Z, and all I have to do is turn the sleeve on and it will model the sleeve in for me. And the same for the stays. You'll notice that the stay section is the Ultra section, so it's a Hadley's Ultra stay. And if we turn it on both sides, okay, it's a bit odd because I'm just doing a single plate, but it will all be set out correctly. So if we look at the same applies for the double. So we have a double purlin splice connection. We choose the main beam, purlin from one side, purlin from the other side. Again, that will put the correct Hadley information in there for me. But this one would be more appropriate to have a sleeve in there. So it knows what type of sleeve it needs in there. And if I turn the stays on both sides, those stays are set out with the correct dimensions as well. So that's where we don't just add the sections in via the Powerpack. We fill in all this joint data and it's already set up in the system for you. So that is, we'll come around this side. Right, what we're going to do now is going to model some side rails. So I'm going to use the same macro. It's still the purlin macro. And I select the supporting beams. Now this time, when it says, do I want a reference point, I'm going to choose yes. Because generally, the side rails are set out from the bottom. You might have a wall 500 mil up. So I'm going to choose a reference point, which is the node of my column. I don't want this time to choose an additional object. So this time we'll put some Stedman sections in instead. So we'll just put some Stedman C sections. We'll go 200 again. Now what we want to do in here, I don't want an ease beam, so I just need to go and turn that off. And then the distances, at the moment, they're set out from the end of the system. But what I can do is I can set those out from my reference point. So if I change that to 0, the first beam goes to the 0 point. So if you had a wall, we could say put it 550 above the reference point. Side rails, I don't know, maybe 1200 spacings. We'll tick intermediate and last, so that's 1200 all the way up the building. So that's what we would do for side rails. So you can use a reference point and then set everything out from the reference point. Okay, we're gonna look at our mezzanine. So I have a model view set up for my mezzanine just to help me isolate things a lot quicker. So we can just turn on the model view for the mezzanine plan, just isolates everything within that window that we've created. So what we have in here, so for the mezzanine, we're going to do some flooring macros. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that my UCS is set on the steel of my mezzanine. And then the macro for this is in fabricator specific macros, and it's called mezzanine floor inset. Now, the thing to be aware of in here is, although it says mezzanine floor inset, it can be an oversail as well. So we're going to start with inset, and we need to choose the first corner and then the second corner. So that will put that in for me. What we'll do in here, we will just change it to Thomas Panel C section. Again, quite fancy the 200 looks a little bit heavy for in there. Let's go 140 then. And then again, what we can do is we can just say, right, the start gap and the end gap 400. And again, all of this stuff has been set out with the correct Thomas Panels information. So if I double click on one of the tie rods, it is a Thomas Panel M12 threaded bar. Just dock that. So again, within the fabricator specific macro, we have a cold rolled floor beam inset tool, cleat from supplier. So we can choose the main beam, we can choose the cleat, and that will set us up with a Thomas Panels cleat, or we can do it with plate. That does also give you a warning to check the design, but that will give us the Thomas Panel trimmer cleat in there. What we can do, that is a joint, so I'm going to do an oversail one for you just to show you. Because it's a joint, I can use the joint copy function. And we'll just put it in on this bay. We'll miss a bay out. But I can do 2 bays now, and it will copy those functions. And then what I can do is go into the joint properties. And again, from the drop down, I can change it to oversail. And this time we will change it to a Kingspan SBS C-section. Go 150. And what I should have done is copied it once, and then we'll copy this one instead. And then again, we have inset, we have oversail, so we've got cold roll floor oversail with a double, so we can choose those, and that information has been set up with Kingspan SBS cleat, and again you can change that to plate if you wanted. So it's just a couple of the cold roll modeling tools just to show you that we've added that data into the Powerpack, but we've also added the joint data into the Powerpack as well. So we'll move on just to have a look at some of the other things that we have added into the Powerpack. So what we'll do, I've got another model view set up just to show you this little weld mesh panel. So what and I used to find this quite a lot as a detailer, is that I would be asked to model the weld mesh. So just the inch by inch or the 2 inch by 2 inch weld mesh to sit in a frame to stop people getting access to certain areas. So I have my little frame modeled. I just need to move my UCS to the end point in here. And that will do. Now what we've done for the weld mesh and the perforated panels, they have been added to the system as grating objects. So if you go to the Objects tab, we have a grating panel. So I'm just going to model variable grating in a rectangular pattern. So I'm going to go from the node in there to the node in there. Now so we have the Redmond Fisher, the standard grating that's available to everyone. But if you have a look, once you install the Powerpack, you now get FH Brundle heavy gauge weld mesh and FH Brundle perforated panel. The only thing you need to be aware of with these meshes is they still show as a rectangular panel. If I go to a wireframe, you will see that there is a hatch on there. This hatch is just an indicative AutoCAD hatch. So that is not the correct exact spacings. It is just an indicative hatch for you. I just need to bring this in a little bit so it doesn't clash into my frame. It's a little bit small. But what we can do from there is I can weld that, not to the beam, to that little frame. I'll just put a little weld marker in there, and we will select that assembly. We'll just run the number in for it, just so that I'm going to run a grating list, just so that you can see that because it's a grating element. I should have put my model rolls on there. That was a bit naughty of me. We'll just run a grating list. Because I've got just those items selected, it will just run the list for those selected items. So you can see in there, we've got the Brundle weld mesh, the gauge of it, and then we've got the sizes. So you can actually start modeling these rather than having to figure it out. And then you can get them cut to size, etc., etc. The same with the perforated panels. The perforated panels, again, won't show all the perforation. It is just an indicative hatch that's on there. And the last few bits we're going to run through are some anchors and some bolts. So we'll close that down. We'll start with a couple of the anchors that are in there. It does depend what part of the world you're in. So we'll put a base plate on. It's a pretty chunky base plate. It'll be 15 thick. I'll just make it 150 square. This is where I'm more interested. Let's just set our anchor spacings out. so a bit more realistic. So what we've added, there was a Hilti catalog in there before. Again, it's not something we as Graitec can change. I know some people want that updating. What we have added in is we've added the Hilti HITV into the system. It wasn't there before. I have checked in one of my older systems, which I didn't have a Powerpack, and it is there. We've also added the Basong range. So those two sets of anchors have been added into the Powerpack for us. And then the last little bit we'll look at for data is bolts. So let's just tidy this up a little bit. So we'll come in here. So a lot of projects these days, you have to follow CE marking procedures. And you also know that bolts also need to be specified according to CE marking, and they need to be specified correctly as ISO bolts. So for example, a grade 8.8 partially threaded bolt needs to be EN ISO 4014. So we as Graitec, like I said, the bolt data has been created and added into the system. So if we look at this connection, we'll go to the bolt type, and you can see that we have ISO bolts and screws, and then we actually have the whole set here. So for the one I was talking about, EN ISO 1041, you've got all the different nut and washer assemblies. We'll just let that update because it is a master joint, so it's updating everything. But what we'll do, we'll just select those, and I will run a bolt list for you. So you can see, okay, the other end of the assemblies, there were some XOXs which were in there before, but we've got the hexagonal bolt, we've got the correct nut with the correct ISO grade, and we've got the ISO washers in there as well. And then the last bit of the system, or bit of today's webinar that I want to cover, is just additional sections that have been added to the system. So as you guys well know, that we can basically model any sort of any section, because we can do it through user sections. So there are some extra sections that have been added into the Powerpack. So the one I'm going to show you is the half round square edge. So for those of you that do architectural work, if we look under other profiles, if we have a look in here, we have got half round feather edge, half round solid edge, and half round square edge. So these are ones that, like I said again, we as Graitec have added in to the system via the Powerpack. So these would be commonly used, obviously, in architectural balustrade with some flat bars and some infill square bars. Now this is all well and good that we've added it in this way. It's not been added into the railing macro. So at the moment, the railing macro won't work with these. So the last little bit I'm going to show you today is just how you can add that to the railing macro. So what we're going to do, we're going to start customizing some tables and copying some data and creating some new elements. So what I would strongly advise before you embark on any of this, it's even us at Graitec who do it all the time, we still do this before we start, is go to your program data folder, Autodesk. So today I'm running Advanced Steel 2019, and we would strongly advise, if you are working on the GBR build, which we are today, to actually take a copy of the whole folder before you start adding things into tables and customizing the system. It's a lot easier if you spend the next 5 minutes and something goes wrong to just put that data back. So we would just always recommend taking a copy of that. It's not going to like it because I'm running Advanced Steel at the moment, so we'll just cancel that copy. So what we need to do is find the section in the databases and the tables. Another couple of things to look for and to have set up. You should really have your own author set up. This is just a default. Having your own author set up means that when you migrate from version to version, anything that you add into the system will get migrated. Sometimes there can be the odd issue if you don't have an author. There is a webinar available. It's called A Basic Advanced Steel, a basic setup to get you going, where John Bennett spends about 40 minutes going through all the management stuff that you should really set up for your advanced steel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the table editor and I'm just going to load all the advanced steel tables. So what I need to do first is find out what that section is called in the system, and that can be found using the filter in the Aster Profiles, the Profile Master table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort it by run name in alphabetical order, and we're going to look for, so we have half round square edge. The type name text is what we need to add into our railing macro. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that exactly out and I'm just going to put it into a notepad file. The next table we need to go and edit is the GUI allowed sections. So these are all of the macros. So we have the joint name and the joint control and the different sections that are available. So if I go to the last one, you can see that the last supplier we added to the system for the 2019 R2 release of the Powerpack was Thomas Panels. So that's where you can see we've added this data in. Now what we need to do is it's the railing macro and it's the top handrail that we want this section adding to. So again, I'm going to copy the macro name out and I'm going to copy the joint control name. And then I'm going to go to the last and we're going to put our own entry in. Now, for me on my system, all my new entries go in at 28,000. Now, the joint name is railing new, so we can put that in there. The joint control, so that's the top rail. It's a section class we're adding, not a shape. And then this is the allowed section that we want to copy in there. So if I come out of that and go back in just to make sure it's gone in, now it does go into numerical order. So it will go in at 28,000. So you can see in there, railing new, top handrail, user, half round square edge. So what I need to do now is go back to my advanced steel, going to update the defaults, so that just reloads all of those databases in. And then we will give the railing macro a whirl. So we'll make it nice and easy. We'll isolate this beam. We will run the railing macro. If it doesn't work first time, we may need to start advanced steel just to reload all the databases, but we should be fine. So what I'm going to do, my posts are going to be made from flat bar. So we're going to go 30 by 3 flat. Sorry, 30 by 10, not 30 by 3. That would be a bit small. Okay, and then handrail, we now should have half round square edge. So that's now been added into the railing macro. So those are all the options available for me. So we'll go with that one, so you can see it working in the railing macro. And then what we can do is, I don't want a kick rail, so I'm going to go to the kick plate tab and just turn that off. And I do want a middle rail, but I want it right at the very bottom, and I want it to be a flat bar. So what we're going to do is we'll just change that to a flat. And again, we'll make that 30 by 10. We'll make this all out of 30 by 10. We can rotate that 90 degrees, and you'll see here that it's set out from the bottom. So if I make it 75 from the bottom of the beam, that's my basic frame in there. And now what I want to do is I want to put some balusters, or what I would call infill bars. and we're going to make these out of UK square bar. We'll go 12 by 12, and we'll just set the distance from the post at 100 and the maximum centers at 100. So that is how we could start modeling that half round square edge that we've added to the system. So I've just created an entry in the railing macro table to allow that section to work. What we can then do, because I don't want to be setting this up every time, is go to the library within that railing macro, and I can import those values. So it will take everything I've just set up there and create an extra line. And then what I can do, I'll just edit those values, and we'll call this half round 30 by 10 flat. Okay, then that will work on any model and any project that I do within this Advanced Steel 2019. So to show you that those library entries will work across anything, we'll start a new drawing. We'll just model in a little bit of beam. We'll go there so you can actually see it. Choose the railing macro. Now it will go to the default setting, but all I need to do this time is go to the library. I can choose half round 30 by 10 flat. And now it will apply those settings so that you don't have to set it up every time. Okay, so that is everything that we're going to cover in today's webinar. Like I said, if you have missed any of the previous ones, please email the marketing team and they will get the links done in the next week or so. So they will email you. If you do have any advanced steel questions, if you want any help with anything at all, just drop me an email and then we can start discussing it from there. I'll leave the webinar going for a couple of minutes if anyone does have any questions, but what I will probably do is just answer these questions one by one or send you all an email of the questions that come in. And if no one has any questions, thank you very much for today. I hope you found it useful, and just to show you some of the stuff that has been added into the system that some people, myself included, until I joined Graitec, didn't know had been added into the system through the Powerpack. Okay, no one has come up with any questions, so thank you very much for today. If you do think of anything in the future, please just reach out to us and we'll help you out. Thank you very much.